On today's quick tips, we're going to paint something that not a single person asked for. Hello YouTube. No, I'm not even joking. Literally no one asked for this. I'm doing it because it's a workup I really like, and I think that I do it differently. And I think that some people might be quite surprised by it and kind of, dig what I'm doing. But this is actually genuinely the first time I've ever done a quick tips for something that no one has ever asked me how to do. We're going to paint blue today. A colour that, obviously, if you're an Ultramarines player, you are all too familiar with painting. But, maybe my little twist on it will be something that you think is cool. Let's go to down cam and we'll see if I'm an idiot or not. Alright, let's kick things off with Caledor Sky from Citadel's base range then. And first of all, I'm just going to chuck this all over the area that I want to paint blue. That's probably not very surprising, but that's what's going to happen. That's why we use sped up footage, so you don't have to watch things that are probably quite boring. A few seconds more of me wafting coats of blue on this. I normally just hairdryer these and, get the second coat on as quickly as possible. It takes the thinness that I paint, 2 or 3, depending on which colour it is. And then you end up with something covered in blue paint, and you go into Mephiston red next. I'm going to thin this right back to the glaziest of glazes. It's going to be very, very, very transparent. I'll show you on the back of my hand. And we're going to glaze Mephiston red into all of the recessed areas, all of the areas where I want shadows to fall. I'm lighting, again, that usual sort of top-down lighting. So anything that would block light from hitting if the light was above, I want to put a shadow in. And anything that's a deep recess, I want to put a shadow in. That's kind of the basic principle of it. Obviously, if you're doing some sort of directional lighting or OSL or something, you have to mess around with that a bit. But for the purposes of just general miniature painting, top down is it's the common way of doing things. And you just want to build up layers of these glazes, shrinking them each time so that as you get deeper into that recess, the glaze gets more and more intense, closer and closer to red. But because it's transparent paint, it does kind of look more purpley on its way in, and it's only when it gets to the deepest part of the transition that it looks red. You can see now, after a few coats of that, it's looking pretty spiffing. It's quite lovely. But we're not done. We're not even close to done. We're going to go back to Caledor Sky now and just glaze out in the opposite direction to tidy up those shades. So you've seen me do this before. You've seen this principle applied to a lot of different colours. The basic methodology is that anytime you glaze in one direction, you want to glaze back out of that in the previous colour to smooth it. You'll never get a perfect transition in just off of the glaze, because the very first time you lay that glaze on top of the paint underneath, it's going to start to look patchy. So you can see it looks super, super clean now because we've done some glazing in the opposite direction. I even used the super zoom, which is, way closer than the human eye can see. To highlight up, we're going to grab Graveyard Bone, and we're just going to start mixing this into Caledor Sky. So I usually start with like a 70-30, and I'll just start to sort of block in some highlights initially. Again, thinking about the light being top down. So like, the upper part of the chest is where the highlight's going to live, but the lower part's not going to get as much light. The upper part of the shoulder, his butt is going to get, is going to get some light, and then streaking down towards the bottom of his robe. And this initially is just block highlighting, but then I switch to a glaze, and as I switch to a glaze, I'm then doing the same thing again, just transitioning into those highlights. And then you can glaze back out with the previous colour if you wish to, if it's not looking clean enough. You just start adding additional layers. We're using really fast footage here because it is just lots of me doing the same thing. I'm just brightening up with Graveyard Bone, shrinking that highlight down, blocking it in, glazing into it, going smaller again and lighter again, blocking it in, glazing up to it, smaller again, brighter again, blocking it in, glazing up to it. I'm sounding like a broken record, but you get the idea. It's a very repetitive process, which is why we use super, super sped up footage for you. But if you ever do want to see this slowed down and in detail, just ask. We can sort something out for you in the future. And you can see as I'm starting to get to the top end, the higher ranges of these pale blues now, You can really see that contrast starting to appear. We actually end up going into almost pure bone. This is bone just tainted with the slightest little amount of blue. And you can really see that it starts to pull some quite serious contrast when you've got that bone that's got that kind of neutral tone to it by being sort of slightly greeny, because it's, you know, kind of yellowy, and then you add a tiny touch of blue to it. So it's sort of fairly neutral, and then you've got this warm contrasting shade tone, and then this cold main body tone, and having all of those sort of things represented together in different proportions gives you this really nice super high contrast way of painting blue. This looks banging on ultramarines. There you go. That wasn't too painful, was it? Blue, but you know, a bit different. It's always been something that I found quite interesting, that idea of shading with not the obvious colour. You can also do it with highlighting, actually. You know, you can highlight your blues by mixing like pale yellows or as I do, you know, bone colours, things like that. But the idea of not necessarily using the most obvious colour to do the thing you're about to do often gives a really cool kind of slightly different, slightly interesting result. So, I don't know, I hope you like it. It's a way of doing blue that you might not have seen before. You might think it's cool. You might think I'm a twat. Do you know what? You can tell me either way. That's what the comment section is for. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you next week, folks. Cheers.